Now, there is no debate that COVID-19 has drastically changed the way in which we live our lives. It's changed the way in which we work out, we go to work, we go to the grocery store, and so much more. It really has had a hugely significant impact on almost every single aspect of our life and the way that we live and function. But the thing that's interesting and significant is the fact that COVID-19 hasn't just changed our lives for the short term, it has absolutely changed our life for the long term as well. And there are things that we have started doing because of COVID-19 that we will simply continue to do, whether it's because it's just a more convenient way of doing it, whether it's because we settle into this new normal, or simply because we fall out of old habits. So in today's video, I want to talk about the 5 businesses that I think are most dramatically affected by COVID-19, and not necessarily a negative way, and potentially a positive way, and the businesses and tactics of these businesses that I think will forever be changed by COVID. So let's get started. Now let's just dive right into it. And I have to talk about restaurants because you can't talk about changes due to COVID without talking about the restaurant industry. Now I am engulfed in the restaurant industry. It's been what I've been in my entire career, between working in restaurants to franchising in restaurants to working with restaurant franchisees. So I understand the restaurant industry, I would say, quite well. With that, there has been a number of things that restaurants have had to implement into their day-to-day operations to accommodate to this new normal and to social distancing and to COVID-19. And there are a number of aspects of these changes that I think will go away once COVID-19 is behind us, but there are a slew of others that I think will stick around forever. Number one is social distancing in restaurants, and of course, wearing a mask in a restaurant. I think that once a vaccine is announced and approved and distributed, I think that these will simply go away. The fact is, restaurants want their restaurants to be at the highest capacity possible. And with social distancing having to cut capacities to 50% or 75%, they will simply want to go back to that 100% number as quickly as possible. And I think that the day they're able to do so, they will opt to do it. But what will stick around for restaurants are a few different things. Number one is the availability to take your food to go, whether that be through curbside pickup, delivery, or just simple to go orders. People have gotten used to eating at home, and there are a number of people that I think are going to have a hard time pivoting back into eating in that restaurant environment. The idea of being able to take your food to go, whether it be curbside pickup or just a simple delivery through a delivery service app, eating food to go, taking food to go, and having it delivered to you is simply an aspect of the restaurant industry that will not go away anytime soon. In fact, I think it's a permanent fixture in the restaurant industry. The second business model that is forever changed by COVID is movie theaters. Now, this is one of the ones that was most significantly impacted by COVID-19 because it was one of the first businesses to close with the pandemic, and it was one of the last to reopen. In fact, there are still movie theaters in my area that have yet to reopen after the pandemic. Now, the thing about movie theaters is that there are a number of different reasons as to why this business model may take a long time to recover from this pandemic. Number one is the fact that social distancing isn't going away anytime soon. Even with a COVID-19 vaccine, I still think that people will be hesitant to sit in really close quarters with people that they don't know or that aren't a part of their party. And in a movie theater, you're sitting roughly 6 inches away from the person next to you, and that person may have had contact with 100 different people. Even with the vaccine, people will be very hesitant to do that. And of course, there'll be a number of people that won't care, but there will be people that do, and that will impact movie theaters' business. Additionally is the content that movie theaters are putting out. Movie theaters make money with a variety of different revenue streams. Number one is ticket sales, and number two is food and drinks. But the thing is that movie theaters don't control the content that they're selling, and they have no real say in what production companies do and how they produce the movies that they're going to end up selling tickets for. And the fact is that movie production companies are slowing down their production schedules. They're not producing content as much as they were before, and even when they are producing content, there's more and more production companies that are opting to do direct to TV movies. For example, Disney released a number of movies over the summer, all of which went directly to Disney Plus. And there's been a slew of others that have opted to distribute their movies on things like Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Hulu. Now, I don't think movie theaters are going away anytime soon, but I think that the idea of releasing movies directly to TV, which was once something that only horrible movies did, I think that more and more production companies are going to opt to do that right out of the gate, to allow for people to watch their movie at home rather than in a theater. And the movie theater will be more of a choice of whether or not you want the full movie experience rather than a thing that you have to do if you want to see a movie once it's released. The third one is doctors. Now, this is an interesting one, and I think that this was something that was kind of already in the works pre-pandemic, but really the pandemic forced doctors to embrace it, and that is the idea of doing telehealth appointment. Now, I can't be alone in saying that I do not like going to the doctor, even for something as simple as a sinus infection. I really hate the task of going to the doctor, checking in, sitting in the waiting room, and then getting checked out by the doctor. This is one of those tasks that I've always hated, and thus I've always avoided going to the doctor altogether. With COVID-19 and with the pandemic, doctors have really been forced to embrace telehealth services and allowing for their patients to visit them virtually. And I think that this is a huge benefit for doctors and patients alike. It's more convenient for patients. It's also more cost effective because you don't have to drive over to the doctor. It saves the doctor and the patient a ton of time, and it makes the doctor more accessible. Going to the doctor for something common and something minimal like a sinus infection, for example, it is simply not needed. And I think that pivoting to a virtual space for those types of doctor's appointments is not only a more cost-effective way of doing business, but it's more accessible for everybody involved. And because of that, I don't think that this is going away anytime soon, even once the pandemic is over. Next is schools and offices. And this is kind of the most obvious one, but in relation to schools, it actually gets pretty interesting. Now, the fact is, we all know that office work has been significantly changed by COVID-19. We've all transitioned to working from home, working virtually. Zoom calls have become now a, household name, and it's something that we've all really gotten used to. And for the most part, I think it's been really embraced by a lot of people. But the fact is that virtual working and virtual learning is not going away anytime soon. And even in the case of virtual learning, there are a lot of parents that prefer it compared to the in-person alternative. There is going to be a lot of employers that want their employees back in the office. That way they can, commingle with one another, they can collaborate with one another, and the employer can keep a better eye on what the employee is doing. But there's also going to be a lot of employers that opt for a virtual workspace. And that's mainly due to cost-saving measures. The fact is that having people in an office is expensive. You have the rent, you have the overhead, you have water, you have electricity, you have things like food, toilet paper, soap. All of these things cost money. And if you have your employees working from home, that's something that you no longer have to worry about. So because of that, the office environment will not go away 100%. There will always be employers that want their workers to be there, but there is a huge section of the office space environment that will go virtual permanently. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the next few years. Additionally is schools, and that's kind of on the same thought as offices. There is going to be school districts that keep a segment of their students learning online. And to an extent, this may be to just adhere to social distancing as much as possible and to appease parents' nerves as much as possible. But for another reason, it may be because parents just prefer that method of learning. For example, my sister is a teacher, and she has mentioned that the district she works in has already said that they will keep online learning around at least for the foreseeable future. Next is in-person events, and this is one of the ones that is incredibly interesting to me because there has been a number of companies that have really done a great job of pivoting their business model to cater to virtual events and virtual platforms. We're seeing it more and more, these traditionally in-person events being held virtually instead. Events that would once take place in arenas or convention halls are now taking place on Zoom calls. And this is something that is really interesting because not only is it more cost-effective for the person putting on the event, but it also allows you to take advantage of a slew of different things that are only accessible online. Things like analyzing customer data, gathering reports, and seeing what the engagement is of a specific event or convention or some sort of speech that's going on. All of this is only possible in the online space. For example, if you have an in-person convention, you can see who bought tickets for that convention, but you actually can't see who attended it and who didn't. You can't see what they did once they were at the event or how engaged they were with that event. But if you have an online event, you could potentially do all three of those things and so much more. And you can do it in a much more cost-effective way compared to the in-person alternative. And it's incredibly interesting to see how these innovative companies have really pivoted their business models to cater to that new environment. Now, the reason why I keep talking about COVID-19 and the impact that it's had on our businesses is because it is incredibly interesting. So often we look at the pandemic in a negative light in relation to business, and to an extent that's true. COVID-19 has caused a lot of business closures, it's caused a lot of bankruptcies, it's caused a lot of heartache. But on the flip side, it's also caused a lot of businesses to have to pivot their business model to be more efficient and more effective. And these examples that I've talked about today are just a few examples of how businesses have pivoted their business model to actually benefit them overall. So with that being said, you guys, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have any other ideas on what businesses have changed and some pivots that have been done in the last few months to accommodate to COVID-19, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.